right, we're live.
We are.
We're rolling. Cool. It's Taking Credit For. I'm Scott.
This is Matt.
It's Lucas.
And this is Tony.
Whole team.
We got the whole band back together for one last show. And this is the first time that we've done this since, guess what, Spider-Man Homecoming? Where we all sat down and watched a movie, and now we're going to talk about how good that movie was, or how bad that movie was, depending on how we felt.
What did we watch?
Yeah, Matt.
We watched Pacific Rim 2 Uprising? Is that the...
It's not called Pacific Rim 2.
It's just
called
Pacific Rim Uprising.
Yeah.
Okay,
Really?
Pacific Rim Uprising 2. It's the sequel to Pacific Rim Uprising. We've got a special showing of it just for us.
Yeah.
They wrote the sequel before they actually released the initial. It was wild.
It explains a lot about this movie, actually.
It does, yeah. All right, so
Boy, does it.
I had a thing planned here. I had a thing in mind for just the opening bit, just to get the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
I want each of you, and I'm going to start actually, Tony, we're going to go counterclockwise. Give me one single word, just to kick things off, that you think kind of adequately describes this film. Just one word, and then we'll plunge into it.
Power Rangers.
Okay, I like the hyphen.
It's two
That's
words.
good. Yeah, it's a compound word.
But I'm
Lucas.
going with it.
Fun.
All right. Pretty good.
Spectacle.
Also pretty good. Mine was going to be charming.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
get into it. Do you guys mind if I take the floor
Please,
first?
yeah, go.
So Pacific
Oh,
Rim...
sorry. The thing that we talked about while you were
That's good.
general impressions, and then we'll say on the recording, in 10 seconds we're going to go deep on spoilers.
We're going to launch into spoilers later on.
So keep it spoiler
General,
free.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So, if you liked the first one, you're going to like this one.
Easy.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
I think no one's going to say the first one was a perfect movie. I think there are some pretty glaring moments in the first one where it's almost hard to watch, and I felt that sometimes... No, I'm just going to get to the end of this. I felt sometimes this movie fell to the same lows as the first movie. That being said, the highs of this movie I appreciated more than the highs of the first.
Just before you get too far away from that thought,
That's my whole thought.
I just want to say, that's why I wanted to just do a quick...
sorry.
This is just one line. Don't worry. Gypsies, nuclear. Some glaring plot holes in that first movie.
Yeah,
that bit where they say that nuclear reacting electronics don't work on electronics.
Gypsy's analog?
Analog, thank you. Yeah, she works on a nuclear reactor, not an electric one. What the
I have a small rebuttal. I've never wanted to punch you so much.
Really? Because I once tried to... In an argument with you, I once tried to reference a comic book cover.
Yeah, I remember
knowingly.
that. I remember.
And so this tops that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
What was the bit? What was the bit? Where's your counterpoint?
I feel like this is going to be a bit of a reach, but just go with me on it.
Okay.
The first Pacific Rim was perfect in its imperfection. I feel like if those plot holes had been any different, it would have been less charming.
Yeah, I actually to sort of agree with that in a sense. I would like to say that I want to change my one word review just briefly. I said charming, of course. Now I would like to replace that with anime.
Boy,
goddamn,
that's a good thing.
The first movie was anime. It just was.
It really was.
Pacific Rim Uprising was anime.
This was Boruto.
Oh, don't you shonen that shit. This was Evangelion. This was Gurren Lagann. This was
this was Gundam.
Exactly. It was all of these things. There's a whole...
Actually, no, Gurren Lagann is probably the closest.
Exactly. There's a whole bit where they at one point, this isn't a spoiler, but there's a recruit, like the new generation. At one point in the movie, we get introduced to the young Jaeger pilots. And it's just a subplot that is Gurren Lagann. It just is.
Kind of is.
It's just anime. The movie is so anime. If you're into fucking Japanese, weird, eccentric animation and just so strange plot points, this movie plays into all of these things. It's honestly so good for that.
You wanna jump in? I guess I didn't actually say anything about the actual...
No, please do go. Yeah, sorry.
If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I felt like I walked into this movie because, if you couldn't tell by my visceral response to Matt's prognosis, I adored the first Pacific Rim. It is quite possibly one of my favorite films. I walked into this movie expecting to be disappointed, and I wasn't? Question mark?
Yeah. No, I'll agree with that because I think Pacific Rim, like, the first time I sat down and watched Pacific Rim, I saw it with Lucas in theaters in our hometown. And we went and saw it with an old friend of ours who's a gentleman by the name of Braden, who's a good boy.
Mm-hmm.
And he, I hate to say it, Braden, I'm sure you're probably going to listen to this, famously doesn't have incredible taste in movies.
I mean, he did make us watch Dragon Ball Evolution.
He did. And he said that 2012 had really great rewatch value, which is a thing I will have written on his gravestone. But
didn't he also, he had that one really embarrassing Facebook post about how great Green Lantern was?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
This is dunk on our good buddy Braden.
Yeah.
I love the boy to death, and actually he and I have made jokes about the fact that there are times when he just, like, loves something that is a bad movie.
He also made, like, a Pixel status on Facebook, too, how he was going to unironically see it, like, 8 times or something like that.
He said that he was going to... I mean, I'm okay making fun of that because I went and saw Pixels on its opening weekend wearing an Adam Sandler t-shirt that I made with my own 2 hands. That's a thing I did. That's a thing I did as a human being.
He made me watch it.
But, Braden brought us, he was like, I want to see Pacific Rim so bad, and I kind of had this, like, I was like, I'll watch a movie, whatever, I'm interested in movies. About approximately 8 years later, I have not 8 years later, approximately 6 years later, I have a degree in film now, so clearly I do enjoy movies that are good also. But when I watched it the first time, it didn't leave an impression. Like, I was just like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. And then I kind of, like, started to get what people got about it. Like, I started to understand why people liked it. I was like, okay, I can respect this worldview and I can empathize with this. And then I watched it again and I was like, this is a fucking awesome movie!
Yeah.
So I got really into it. And then I went and saw this movie and I thought it was pretty friggin' cool. Luke?
You want to jump on that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I said it was fun. I think they had a lot more fun with it than the first one. Because the first one had a more darker tone, like, oh, the world's ending, there's monsters everywhere. And this one's like, well, this is going to spoilers, where it's like, oh, nothing's really happening right now.
No, that's, I mean, one of the opening scenes, like one of the literal first scenes that happens in the movie, is the hero of the film trades a piece of scrap of some sort for a flat of sriracha. And he's like, somebody just wants my hot sauce. And it's just like this very, like, oh, this is what the world is kind of like in this post-apocalypse, like, where society has kind of restructured itself.
He lives in, like, half a mansion that got busted up by a kaiju.
Okay, but this is, like, the really absurd part, because this movie is 100% goofier, and it goes for comedy way more than the first one did. But it's also really dark in a lot of ways that the first one wasn't. And you get, like, tangibly, measurably closer to the end of the world in this movie than they ever did in the first one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some definite moments where there's, like a thing, a reveal. This is going to play into the spoiler chat a little bit, but one thing about
we could just start the spoiler warning now.
I have 2 things I want us to do first.
Cool. But just getting in preparation of that, one thing that I will say of note about this film is the first movie you could pretty much predict everything that happened, and that was fine because it played into that. It knew what it wanted to be, and it wasn't trying to hide anything from you. This movie actually surprised me on like 3 or 4 quantifiable occasions. Like, there were a couple of things that happened that I was just like,
I think I know which things you're talking about.
Yeah. It's just like there were certain reveals that played, and I was like, that was actually pretty freaking smart. So I think the movie is structured a little bit more, I don't know, menacingly in some senses.
Okay, 2 things. First, I want to do the shout out to Mother's Basement, who
Jeff Thu, another British Columbia based YouTuber
who is wildly more successful than we are. Tweeted just about, like, he must have seen the same kind of showing that we did because we walked home. Pacific Rim Uprising beat Ready Player One to the punch for the first Hollywood appearance of a Gundam by 1 week.
There's a scene that takes place in Japan,
yeah.
And it's filmed in a location that famously has a, I think, 17-foot tall statue, I believe, of the main Gundam from Gundam Wing. I believe.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it doesn't look like
Yeah.
the same design as like the first Gundam.
Yeah, but regardless, there's an actual real statue of a Gundam that exists in Japan, and this movie like does a hilarious pan up to it at one point in the middle of a gigantic fight between a giant robot and a giant monster, and it's like, oh, right, the world is weird.
A second thing. Which of the new Jaegers was your favorite and why?
Oh no, don't make me talk first. I've been bearing the load.
I already forgot all their names.
Well, just fucking that.
I really liked the design of Athena.
Saber Athena.
Saber Athena. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was interesting seeing a sleek, fast
It's a
Jaeger.
nice change.
Yeah, the one. I mean, it had some inconsistencies during the fight that I thought were interesting, but
Yeah.
the design was sleek. Having one that was built for speed, I kind of thought was cool.
It kind of felt like
An evolution of Striker.
an evolution of Striker Eureka. Exactly, That's exactly what I was going to say. It feels like if Striker Eureka is a Gen 5 Jaeger in the first movie, that Saber Athena is a Gen 6.
Yeah. Saber Athena would also be my pick. Although November Ajax, again, we talked about this like briefly on the walk home. That's a really good name.
Yeah.
November Ajax is sick. I did have one other thing. I really wish they hadn't called Gypsy Avenger Gypsy Avenger.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Because that is a slur that needs to be removed.
To the credit of the naming convention for not only the original movie but this movie, what they're referencing is in reference to the turbine engine that's in the chest of the Jaeger, and that is specifically the name of a turbine engine that was used for fighter pilot planes in the First World War. And it is deliberately spelled differently on both occasions because it's not supposed to be in reference to the slur. It's just a name.
And I did also like note that it was spelled differently, and
Exactly.
that's what I figured the reason was.
Yeah. So it's dicey, I agree, but it's not in reference to a slur intentionally.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
They're going for that, like, and this is something that they were way more successful at in the previous movie, giving the different Jaegers their own unique visual design and aesthetic. They were going for that World War II pilot look, and
the spinning
did it
turbine
work.
in the chest is like the biggest callback to that sort of technology that could have been conceived of. So
So we both went.
Lucas,
Oh,
quiet boy.
Just describe your favorite Jaeger.
Yeah.
I think it was Titan Avenger, the one with the wrecking ball hand.
Titan Redeemer.
Redeemer.
Yeah.
And the one that also had the shotgun fist.
Yeah, that was super cool.
That was
and
rad.
also
That was
had
cool.
the chain gun belly that turned into a chain gun
That-
spine.
That was Phoenix Bracer. Bracer Phoenix.
Was it? I thought.
They were.
Yeah, we'll get
We'll
into
get
that.
there.
Never mind.
In the climax, the one that Lucas is talking about is really cool.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Scott.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of because each of them are pretty cool. I like Saber Athena a lot for all of the reasons that Matt mentioned. I think it's cool the way that its fight scenes were choreographed, and actually the one whose name I can't remember that had the electric whip.
Guardian Bravo.
Guardian Bravo. I think Guardian Bravo was actually the most visually distinct of the
It
bunch.
super was.
Yeah, I think Guardian Bravo is probably my favorite. Didn't get a ton of screen time, unfortunately. Had some pretty goofy bits at a point later on in the movie. But also, for the sheer, like, going back to my whole anime diatribe,
I know where you're going with this.
Scrapper. Scrapper sucks.
Oh, Scrapper's great, actually.
Scrapper sucks, but Scrapper's so perfect.
No, I Scrapper might actually beat out Saber Athena. I like Scrapper quite a bit.
Scrapper is really good. For context, we get a character that has constructed a Jaeger.
We'll leave it. We'll leave it at that until the spoiler warning.
Yeah, exactly. But like this is like a half Jaeger essentially. Scrapper's like a wee bab.
It gave me. I really wanted to like it, and if we lived in a pre-Michael Bay Transformers world, I would have. But it gave me too many Bumblebee vibes.
Yeah, a lot of the scenes that I saw during this,
totally.
where they had like a funny joke during a thing that was happening during a pseudo-serious action film, I was like, oh, This is like if Transformers was made good, though.
And that's the thing. If this had been what Transformers was when Transformers came out, if we had gotten this instead, I would want to live in that cinematic landscape more than the current one we're currently in, because Transformers has become one of the most influential, like, stylistic movies in summer blockbusters since it came out.
Yeah.
And because of the way that this movie takes those things and does them differently, I like this a lot more.
Do you want to hear a quick interjection? And this is not in favor of Transformers in the slightest, but do you want to hear a weird thing that's kind of upsetting to think about when you think about the first Transformers movie?
You lay it on me.
The two screenwriters that were saddled with the project by Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
I off the top of my head, I don't know their names, but they're clever guys, good screenwriters. They were hot shit in Hollywood at the time. They were like the shooting star at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that they were going to be approached for a project, and they also knew that Spielberg was interested in making Transformers.
Spielberg?
Yeah, Spielberg helped co-produce the...
Okay.
Yeah. But when he pitched it to them, they were like, we're going to turn it down. This is not something we're interested in. We want to do less big projects or whatever. And when he approached them, he knew that they were disinterested, and he said to them, this is not a movie about giant robots. This is a movie about a boy buying his first car. And it's like, that's what sold them on working on the project initially, and then Michael Bay shows up and it turns into this whole thing. But, like, could you imagine if that initial pitch had landed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be a substantially different movie.
Exactly.
I mean, it would have been Old Yeller, but with a giant robot.
Exactly.
Shia LaBeouf just takes him out the back with a shotgun.
Shiloh LaBeouf.
That was upsetting to hear.
Yeah,
but that's my Transformers diatribe anyways.
Back to Uprising. Do we want to lift the spoiler?
Yeah, it's spoiler time, baby. We're going to talk about the plot in pretty vivid detail to what we can recollect.
Let's count down to that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Spoiled!
Ready? All right. Would anybody like to take a crack at it, or shall I?
I went first in part A, so you can take this one.
Yeah, take a jump-in point. Start early, and we can work our way through.
Okay. Stuff I like.
Yeah.
This movie did a couple of things that the first movie did really well, and it also did them quite well. Things like there's that bit with the protests at the UN summit, and there's a reference in a news scroll to kaiju worshippers being at the protest,
like a pseudo-cultism sort of thing going on.
And that was one of those, that was one of the like really textual details in the first movie that really sold me on it and really made me fall in love. Like, yeah, there would fucking be kaiju worshippers in this world.
And not to jump in too early, but for just an example of that making complete sense, in the first movie you've got Newt.
Yeah.
Newt is tattooed with kaiju. He's passionate. And that's going to play into the conversation.
And there was also that, also in the first movie, the temple across the street from Hannibal Chow's hideout, which was made out of kaiju bones.
Yep. And you have people worshipping at the base of the skull.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, the other really, really fucking good thing about this movie, Newt.
Yes.
Fucking Newt.
If you want to talk about, like, a natural growth between one movie to the next, that is the most organic change to a character that is surprising and also makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Also,
holy shit.
Who would have guessed that Charlie Day is the villain that Pacific Rim deserved?
Okay, hang on. Not only is Charlie Day the villain, Charlie Day is Rita Repulsa.
Yeah.
Make my monster grow!
Oh, yeah.
He's literally a Power Rangers villain. Also, just before we launch too deeply into the, we're going to talk about Newt a lot in this. When he first appeared on screen,
Hannibal Chow?
he's Hannibal Chow.
Yeah, he
he's
is.
just Hannibal Chow.
Oh my
he
God.
just became Hannibal Chow. He's got golden lapel pricks on the end of his.
The colors.
He's got the glasses.
The glasses.
He's got the gaudy patterns.
Yep.
He literally just became Hannibal Chow.
Yep.
And that was perfect. He saw the man who was who he wanted to be, but stylish and classy in the first film, and then he became that man.
Yep.
Oh God! I just the second he showed up, I was like, "This is the best thing that could have happened."
Yep.
And then I was wrong because even better things happened.
Other good things. I really bought the relationships between the core cast.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't try to replicate the rivalry between
Chuck Hansen and Raleigh Beckett.
Yeah, with Nate and Jake.
Nate and Jake. Yeah.
They had obviously they had a history,
a turgid past,
but they also almost immediately worked through that, and it was shaky, but they got there, and you could see it was complicated, but they cared about each other.
There's that great scene where the recruits are fighting with each other, and Nate and Jake, Jake of course John Boyega, and Nate Scott Eastwood, all of the attractive features of Clint Eastwood, but young and hot, roll into the room, and Nate says something to the effect of, "We are family, and when we don't get along, we have to just deal with it." Does a huge turn of head to Jake and says, "Get past it and forgive each other." And it's like, that's the scene. That's the scene clearly where he's decided to opt for forgiveness, whatever their rocky backstory is. And it's perfect. They play it so straight, they play it so simple, and it makes sense with the characters.
It does. And when he was first introduced, I was so ready for them to go on every trope of the douchebag who needs to have his ass Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck Hansen.
And you know what? Chuck worked in that movie. He was a trope, but he was the best version of that trope I can think of.
He was a trope that served plot purpose.
Yeah, which is kind of how I will describe pretty much every negative feature of the first movie, which was, it's a trope, but this is the best version of that trope I can think of.
Yeah. Yeah. Both. I mean, the character relationships are huge in this movie.
Yep.
God bless. God bless.
Thank you.
Also, fucking Newton Gottlieb.
Yeah, the natural progression of
great.
God, that was so. That was the closest I came to feeling a feel in this movie.
Yeah, it was excellent. The way that they play the relationship is as if there's been a breakup, like a traditional relationship, and they broke up, and neither of them are over it, but they can't admit it because of pomp and circumstance. So it's very dynamically emotional and very, very believable because it's such a specific kind of emotional tumultuousness.
I had another good thing actually going off of that.
Yeah.
The bit where Newt is like, "You should come to dinner with me tonight, and you can meet my wife."
He says you can meet Jill.
Jill, sorry.
He gives it. He says a name.
He says a name.
We'll get into that.
But because that alone adds a lot of depth to what he's going through, because he's not all gone. He was trying to get help.
Yeah.
Oh my. Ugh. Newt stole the show this time. He was a standout in the first movie. He is probably the best part of this one, other than John Boyega, who probably improving some of those lines.
Oh my god, and he crushed it.
I was ready to come here and say that John Boyega carried this cast on his back. It's not the case though.
Yeah.
I just kind of I looked at the cast. I was like, John Boyega and everybody else. What are you doing here? And then no, pretty much everybody held their own. I was pretty surprised and impressed. Yeah.
And on top of that, just same thought, Scott Eastwood specifically, beautiful man. I will never redact that sentence. He was in Suicide Squad and he was underutilized, clearly. Because in this movie, he proved himself. He is an actor. He played this character.
It's kind of sad that this is his first big role that I'm aware of, because
he's done minor stuff. He worked with his dad before. He was in Gran Torino.
Yeah.
He did this, that, and the other thing. But this is a movie where he got to play a character, and it was sort of like the way that Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, I think, went out of his way to change his last name so that people wouldn't just buy his shit because his dad's name was on it.
I'm surprised you didn't go with Nicolas Cage for that metaphor.
Well, I mean, don't get me on about Kal-El Cage. But
I meant Nicolas Coppola.
Oh yeah, Nicolas Coppola. You're right. Then, I mean, another example of that is David Bowie's son, Duncan Jones. He's a film director.
Yeah.
didn't want people to go see his movies because his name was Bowie. So he changed his name, and then he made Moon, incredible.
Yeah.
He made, he did another good one that is slipping my mind right now. He did Mute on Netflix recently, which was awesome.
Okay.
Side note, go watch Mute. It's on Netflix. Everybody has Netflix. But Scott Eastwood,
Did good. Oh yeah.
yeah, he just did it. Guy showed up and did a fucking good movie.
I mean, he didn't have a particularly. I mean, not that I'm saying I could do better, but he didn't have a particularly difficult role. In all fairness,
Fair.
He did good. I don't want to take that away from him, but he didn't have a trying role.
Hmm.
I want to put a pin in that and come back to it after Lucas goes.
Going for what?
Do you want to talk about things you liked about the movie?
Oh, yeah, sure.
The specific
like Scott
things.
mentioned, it was very anime.
Yeah,
I
boy,
respected
was it.
that.
Everything about it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far ahead of the movie, though, about the anime things.
Jump into some early stuff though. Like
Okay.
what are some things that caught you at the beginning that you were either interested or disinterested in?
The Rogue Jaeger.
Yeah,
That was
cool.
interesting.
It
And
was-
then when they
Shadow the Hedgehog.
it was
Obsidian Fury.
Obsidian Fury.
Shadow the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
yeah, when they finally beat it and they find a kaiju brain inside it.
Jesus, that was good.
That was
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck is
I
this?
wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't really expecting that.
I first I thought it was gonna be the bandit people from the beginning. I thought it was gonna be them at first.
I was expecting it was going to be a drone.
I thought it was going to be like a specifically designed version of one of the drones, and it was going to turn out that Xiao,
Yeah.
the name Xiao, Xiao was trying to propagandize her product by.
Oh, that would have been smart.
Boy,
though.
am I glad that red herring was just a red herring, though.
Yeah, because Xiao turned out to be one of the best characters in the movie.
She
Easy.
was and the thing, it was way too obvious that she was like the evil human.
and then the frickin' kaiju brain that's made out of organic tissue from our plane.
It's so anime.
It's so anime.
It's very anime.
Anything else?
The kaiju drones.
Yeah.
That was a that's getting into stuff I don't like.
I mean, they were interesting. I didn't hate them, but I was like, eh.
No, they were interesting. They were underutilized.
Yeah,
They were
they were putties.
They were putties!
They were worse than putties because like
they were the black blob men from Suicide Squad. We can shoot them, but they don't bleed.
no, they were worse than that because these were interesting.
That's true.
And then they were just there for like 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, and then gone.
Yeah.
There was so much potential there. Like that setup when like they were opening multiple breaches around the world and kaiju were coming through, that I was so like, oh my god, this is amazing. I have no idea how they're gonna get through this. This is the apocalypse scenario. This is where they lose.
And there's like, boop, turn them off.
And I was actually like, I was so upset when that happened. Like,
Yeah, that's fair.
you had such a good, interesting setup for World War Kaiju.
I think if the movie were ready to be approximately 40 minutes longer than it actually was, that would have been the thing to extend.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I also think that having the whole them opening breaches element of the plot, they pulled off. I believed it. I liked it. There was the scene where the one kaiju's coming through and the breach closes as it's climbing
That was
through.
fucking great.
Oh my
Splits it in
god!
half.
And the beams that they're using to open the breaches like cut off some of its appendages and stuff, and it's just like this absolutely disgusting scene. But I mean, what it did was it was a kind of rocky, not that great utilization of a really interesting plot point to get to a pretty solid climax.
I
like how it wasn't like, oh, like 100 kaiju got it. It's like just three
big mean old ones.
I wish that whole final fight had gone differently.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I wanted like, all right, 2 of our remaining Jaeger are gonna rocket off to intercept these 2, and then they're going to like converge and take on the Category 5.
Would have been pretty cool.
Because then we would have had more action scenes, which this movie was shockingly light on.
Yeah.
Although the action scenes in this movie must cost a fortune.
Mhm.
That's fair, but
Yeah.
I mean, but also, why are you making a Pacific Rim movie if you're not going to stuff it full of action sequences?
like let's just number it. We have the two brawls with Obsidian Fury.
Sorry, yes, we do, but we do have it's not like an abject like punchy action scene.
You're going to say a Scrapper at the beginning, right?
Scrapper and November Ajax.
You know what?
That is an action scene.
I'll accept that. Scrapper, November, Ajax, two brawls with Obsidian Fury, which I honestly feel should be rolled into one because there was not that much different about them other than the fact that Avenger wasn't getting their ass kicked as much.
Mm-hmm.
Do you count the training sequence where the
No.
kids fell?
No.
Yeah, that was.
No, I don't.
Okay, that's curious.
But to the credit of the break between those two fight scenes between Avenger and Obsidian,
Mhm.
a very important thing does happen in between them. That sort of bisects.
That is true.
Yeah, so that's all I got there.
But just because of like how quickly Obsidian Fury is introduced and then dropped, I feel like those can just be rolled together because that's a plot cul-de-sac.
Also, can we, before you jump in, just the fact that Gottlieb gets to give the code names to everything that shows up.
Yeah, that's
it's
fun.
like Obsidian Fury, and also God Raijin, and I don't know kaiju names. Like it's just, I love the image, the mental image of the scene where he's like sitting in a room. He's like, what can I call them?
So sorry, we have one,
Mhm.
two. We have the drones going crazy, which I also have trouble counting because it was a very one-sided action scene.
I mean, there was some good little bits right at the end with the Jaegers, and there's the one that gets his head shot off with a cannon. And
That was cool.
It's pretty cool.
But you know what we saw a lot of there? Trained rangers getting their asses beat.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, there was
Like
a
that,
lot
but
of
that was worse than Crimson Typhoon and Cherno Alpha dying unceremoniously in the first one.
but that does set the precedent for the direness of the climax as well. And it's a plot contrivancy, absolutely. But it segues into the necessity of the recruits being the characters that we've actually spent time developing to a certain degree, the recruits being pertinent characters in the finale. So within the context of the story that it's trying to tell, watch the table. I think that it does what it needs to. I don't know if it's a good thing, but this is why I think it had to happen that way for the sake of the story.
I agree that it is the duct tape holding the story together.
Exactly.
This story tries to do too much.
Yes.
It tries to do way too much. It feels like it doesn't know what it wants to do because the recruits are not developed at all, and we only see 2 Rangers. We don't see any of the other experienced pilots for any of the other Jaegers. We don't see the pilots for November Ajax or Titan Redeemer or Guardian Bravo or Saber Athena.
Presumably, that girl who kissed both of them is in one somewhere because they reference her as a ranger at one point.
No, she's a mechanic.
Really?
Yeah,
Yep.
she is.
Could have sworn they called her a ranger. But that's
They
cool.
called her J-Tech.
But I mean, if the movie were 40 to fucking an hour longer, that would be the circumstance under which we would be able to take a look at these characters. But for the sake of the actual narrative that it sets out to tell, if they tried to introduce the Ranger, the pilots of the Jaegers, the movie would have fallen apart completely because it would have lost its way with like way too many characters.
It would have had too many characters, but
Exactly.
I feel like it's already done that. Because, it's anime as fuck having the like recruits come in to pilot the Jaegers. They have never piloted Jaegers before, and they are going against like quantifiably the most dangerous kaiju yet in the most difficult to pilot Jaegers.
There's 2 category 2s. They're not that dangerous.
Category 4s.
Yeah,
No.
2 category 4s.
Two
and a
category
5.
4s and a 5.
Oh, I thought it was 2 2s
Yeah.
and
That
a
was,
5.
no,
Oh,
that was 2 4s
I
and a
misread
5.
that then.
Yeah. And then they fuse into the biggest... Okay, we can talk about that.
Wait, before you talk about that, speaking of too many characters, killing off Mako.
Yeah, that did not sit well with me.
I didn't like it because I like Mako a lot.
I didn't like it because of the execution.
Execution.
Hey.
I didn't like it because, I know, again, Charlie Hunnams, he's off doing other stuff. Raleigh should have been there for that. He should have been there at any point.
What I think would have been the workaround for that would have been if the sequence at which Jake goes to the 3D, weirdly, the hologram memorial, and he sees his father, and he sees Mako, and he sees the Russian pilot of Charlie Alpha.
And the others were on the sides.
Yeah, but if they had done any effort to focus on an image of Raleigh
that
at that point,
that would have pissed me off even more.
that would have been great. What are you talking about?
I disagree.
If they had just had it like that, as a result of the war, at one point he passes. They talk about the radiation shielding in the first movie. What if, when during his piloting, he pilots alone? The mental load causes. There's
you know what
there's
I would,
plot there.
Okay, but what I would have accepted from that is like a line, because Jake wouldn't know that. He's been gone for. He hasn't been here for any of this since before the war.
But Jake doesn't need to know this for the camera to show the audience it.
He could easily say, "Aren't there other like drift-compatible pilots who are familiar with this Jaeger?"
It's not the same Jaeger.
It's not the same Jaeger, but
pretty
you're getting my
close.
point. He could have easily said, "There's got to be someone else who can do this stupid job."
I mean, but I think that sequence would have been served equally well by. We don't need to beat around, like, we don't need to. With Raleigh Sinclair, Raleigh Beckett, Raleigh Beckett. Thank you. Who the fuck is Raleigh Sinclair?
I don't know.
But with Raleigh Beckett, if he was one of the faces in the memorial for the heroes who saved the world, if it just turned out that at some point he had passed since the war, it's been years since the war, and they just featured that would have been a subtle element to add to the story that would have at least pseudo-explained why he only comes up 1 or 2 times.
See, I think
without him being present in the plot.
I do think we're coming at this from slightly different perspectives, because I think you are looking at it as this is what the movie needed to do to be what it is, and I'm looking at it as this is what the movie needed to do differently to be better.
Yeah, but I mean, that's taking into like the movie would have had to be 4 fucking hours long to include some of the things that you were talking about.
Or like cut out a bunch of stuff, or be a mini series instead of a movie. Like if this honestly felt more like the pilot for a Netflix series than it did a movie.
But that's not what it is.
I guess the one other thing that I liked was the 3 kaiju getting nano machine together into one big kaiju. That was silly.
We also just agreed to call that Voltchu or something. Voltron Kaiju.
It was Voltron Kaiju.
Yeah.
It was literally Mega Kaiju.
Yeah, I know.
You were super close. Kaichu.
Kaichu. Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's cool though. Whatever.
Yeah, alright. Anyways. Can we talk about... I think this is the time at which I want Lucas, you to spearhead this. Charlie Day. Talk to me about Nude, baby.
Yeah, he took a complete 180 in character change and just...
He didn't 180.
Yeah,
He progressed straight forward down his path.
That was a natural progression.
Yeah, I guess. And his kept the fucking brain. He was literally mind fucking.
Or he found a new one.
I mean, it was like some goddamn anime-ass, the bad anime that I don't like to watch, the one with the tentacles.
Oh, God.
If we're talking, sorry, this is Luke's thing, but if we're talking about like really good implied purely visual storytelling, he went full, the more evidence he went full Hannibal Chow. He got all of those kaiju parts.
Yeah.
He must have collected those.
Oh yeah. He had to have people.
And then grown them.
And as soon as they said, when the drones showed up and the kaiju bits started blowing up out of them, and one person said, "But Shao Industries doesn't have a bioengineering
thing
laboratory or whatever."
Newt
it's
is
like
the bioengineering
it's
team.
just Newt.
And like that was, and then he says like 30% of your industry is automated. That was it. That was good. That's all I needed for that.
Matt?
On Newt?
Yeah.
I guess you guys have said it. I agree with most of this.
Launch in, cut deep.
I mean, we're going to be a bit of a different direction from Newt, if that's cool.
Yeah, take
Okay,
it.
great. Alright, so I don't have the same affection for the series you guys do. I like the series enough, but I don't love the series like you guys do. So brace yourselves.
Uh.
So this first one, in all fairness, is a problem I also have with anime. So there you go.
That thing we can't get you to do.
Mr. Dissenting Opinion.
I'm watching, just sidebar, watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood finally.
I'm actually rewatching that right now.
That's pretty good.
It is. Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. So there you go. Too much exposition. This film, I was just sitting there. We were getting told so much. We were being shown so little. And I mean, the first act, I kind of was like, okay, you have a lot of ground to cover. A lot has happened that you just need to tell us to get us up to speed. And then it just kept happening and happening and happening. And so, like, I wasn't thrilled about that. This movie had a big problem with time. So when there's a couple of instances, most notably when the kaiju appear and are like going towards Mount Fuji, which I'll get to that in a second. They have enough time to just rebuild Jaegers.
That bugged me a lot.
Well, just because I mean, like those Jaegers
or the building montage.
We got 45 minutes.
Yeah, and it's just like holy smokes, right?
This would take like months, possibly years.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, some of these parts alone, how are we going to even lift that?
Which, like, that's something they kind of glossed over in the first movie, but you can let it go because it wasn't as like blatantly focused on like.
And there wasn't as tangible of a time crunch.
Yeah,
and there also wasn't a fucking montage.
there was that bit in the first one where Stacker Pentecost says, "Get these two Jaegers back up to fighting." It's something right after the fight with Leatherback and Otachi. And it's like, if you look too closely at that, they don't have enough time to really do that because of the resources it would take.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like slapping you over the head with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and like also the fact, just actually going back on the note about the first movie, there's this whole bit where Gottlieb's like, and in 3 days we'll have a double event, and then 2 days after that we'll have a triple event, and like he's just spitting all over his microphone, and it's incredible because Burn Gorman's just a fantastic actor, but they do create that timeline.
Yeah.
And then they don't follow through on being like, and 2 days have passed. Like, they don't beat you over the head with the fact that, like, time is tangible and exists in this universe, so you don't have to think about it too much. This movie really sets a precedent.
Yeah. And there's another part, if I remember, I'll come back to it, but let's go to Mount Fuji here. Do you mean to tell me that, like, nobody had put those dots together? They are literally straight lines. Literally.
For people wondering what Matt is talking about, they figure out where the 3 kaiju are going using a big digital map of the world.
And where all the previous kaiju had all been going.
Like, the directions they were headed.
And they have this, like, cutely modeled 3D renders of each kaiju, and they're like, oh, look, it's video game time.
And like, it was only when, it was Jake, right?
Yeah.
It was Jake who said,
maybe they were going somewhere.
Draw their trajectories. And they do, and it's Mount fucking Fuji.
Yeah.
Because it's anime.
Well, that, and... Okay, another problem I had is their reasoning is they were like, oh, the rare metals and apocalypse events. And I'm like, oh, okay. So the rare material is going to be a part of this, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that just wasn't a part of the plan. Zero bearing, really.
No, the reason that the kaiju were trying to get to Mount Fuji were because the rare metals were there, and when plot contrivancy, when the kaiju blood mixes with the rare
big
metals,
explosion.
It creates the apocalypse.
I don't think we needed the. I mean, that works. Don't get me wrong.
Can we talk about kaiju blood rockets?
Yeah, that's a thing we should talk about actually.
Okay, so they do a really good job of establishing in the first movie kaiju blood is toxic.
Kaiju blue.
Kaiju blue. They establish it in the opening montage before we even see a fight.
When you get the blood near you for a long time, you get what's referred to as kaiju blue. It's a disease. We don't know what the disease does, but we're given to understand that it's terminal.
Yeah,
it makes Aegis Elbo's nose bleed.
He got cancer from radiation, not from the blood.
It is a toxic effect that this has that is does not jive with our planet and our world. Cool. Okay, they established that. They backtrack so hard in this movie on that.
And actually, on backtracking from the first movie, Matt, your point about the straight lines to Mount Fuji. My biggest beef with that is that one of the things that I thought was really cool about the first film is the fact that when Newt initially Bridges he goes into the drift with one of the kaiju secondary brains, whatever. He comes back and he explains sort of their pseudo battle plan. He explains it quickly and rapidly, but this is before his brain has been infected and he's turned into a fucking antagonist, before he's turned into a literal villain. This is when he's just a scientist trying to understand. And he drifts with them and he says, this is why they're hitting the major cities, is because these are the exterminators. They want to hit the major cities to wipe out the most people in one single event as possible, because the kaiju show up and they wipe out a fuck ton of people and they knock down a building and then that building wipes out a fuck ton of people and then their blood spills all over the place and everybody gets cancer and they die, and that's a third of the Earth's population. There you go.
Dealt with, handled, yeah.
Eat it, Tokyo, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, they're all headed to Mount Fuji. No, the trajectory of these kaiju have been planned all along. It's like,
yeah.
Come on, like, there was a cool thing in the...
Another thing on them backtracking from the first movie is like a major plot point in the first movie is that the world does not want to build more Jaegers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, we don't have the resources.
They just want to build
They
buildings.
don't have the resources.
They
yeah,
want to
exactly.
build the wall.
And this movie is like... this movie is just kind of ignores that. It's like, not only are we training more pilots, we're building hundreds of thousands. We're building hundreds of drones.
And brand new, like, trying to be individual Jaegers who all have their own gimmick, despite the fact that we haven't seen a kaiju in 10 years.
Yeah.
It's been a decade!
Yeah, exactly. You could have gotten away with, well, the world saw how effective they were against kaiju, except it's been a decade.
We haven't seen any, and by all accounts, the war's over, the breach is closed.
Yeah.
We're in... And kind of circles back to what the original sort of plot pitch for this movie was when they first were like, we're going to do a sequel. And Guillermo del Toro was still attached, Ballistic Del Torso was still attached to the project. And he said, I want to make a movie about post-war Pacific Rim universe where we're trying to figure out what we can do, like how we can best utilize this technology now that we have it and we don't have a need for it anymore. And they kind of open on that a little bit. A little bit. Like, the Jaegers are still around. What do? We've got sort of a peacekeeping force for the UN. We've got November Ajax. He's, doing his... He's a fucking beat cop by all intents and purposes. Exactly. He's Paul Blart, Pacific Rim cop. And
Paul Blart Ajax.
Exactly. And that's really cool. And then they really spin away from that when you get to the new recruits and we're doing a new Jaeger program and all of a sudden there's 40 Jaegers and fuck you, the world. We don't need resources to build buildings for people to live in. Like,
I can live in the Jaegers.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of things I've been sitting on for a while. That being said, the movie is very enjoyable to watch.
Mm-hmm.
My word was spectacle, because the whole time I was just kind of taking it in of like, this looks good.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'll probably regret saying this, but none of that looked CG to me.
No, I mean, not only did the movie look good in general, like, I completely agree. It's just like they did good work with what they were doing with their pacing, but also the scale for the Jaegers was so much more tangible in this one.
Totally.
Like in the first movie, you've got the cool scene. Gypsy Danger's going to use a boat as a sword, and he's going to hit Leatherback, and Leatherback's going to be sad. And it's like, all right, but this is like a big thing fighting a big thing on a big scope. And in this movie, it was like very close camera angles that were utilized. So you get a feel for like the depth of field and the foreshortening. It's like, there is a lot of distance between me and that thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, the fight scenes that were shot in that way kind of I think were more effective because it's like, holy guacamole, look up there.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty cool. I think scale was pretty big in this movie.
It was effective.
Yeah.
I felt like I mentioned this a bit before, but Power Rangers and Transformers.
Yes.
This movie was the love child of Michael Bay Transformers and the Power Rangers reboot from last year.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think part of the theme of this movie is just to be bigger, because hey,
Yeah.
put three kaiju together.
These Jaeger are going to be like noticeably bigger than past Jaegers have been, and you can measure that.
The whole thing with the Russian girl, she's like,
Big size is bigger is better.
yeah, exactly.
And also the fact that she had like clearly dyed blonde hair was like such a callback to the Russian pilots from the first movie that I
thought
kind
they
of
were gonna do the whole he was my father.
I kind of wanted her to be related to them in some way, just because she was A, Russian, and B, shared visual distinct qualities.
And wanted so badly to be a pilot.
Yeah. Did anybody else think she really looked like a young Charlize Theron, or was that just me?
No, I agree with that.
A little bit, yeah.
There was just a take where I saw that and I was like, sorry? I was like, oh, no, not Charlize.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of touched on this before, and I do want to say this, and I'm going to try to like keep things cool because I am very passionate about this franchise. I felt like they either needed to cut out the stuff with the recruits or cut out the stuff with Jake.
Easily.
One of those things needed to go, and either like go... I hate saying this as an explanation, but go Ender's Game and focus on the recruits and like maybe one ranger training them, or focus on Jake's redemption arc with maybe one protege and then his old partner.
Yeah, and I mean, you say Ender's Game. I was gonna make the exact same comparison, but Gurren Lagann, like the recruits, the young anime team that will eventually do.
Mine is the drill that will strike the heaven.
Yeah, well, there's that old drill. That big old drill that they use to pierce the skull of every kaiju, especially the category. What is it? 4, 4, 5. That's 13. Category 13 at the end there.
Also, I have a question. This is probably just something that I'm failing to remember already, but
Sure.
The thing that Mako gives them, the map that leads them to that leads them to Hoth,
Flat
that
cul-de-sac.
they blow up the base or whatever. What?
What
we
was
ever?
there?
Yeah. Did that come up? Did I miss that?
What
No.
I think
Did not come up. Okay.
What
cool.
I think happened there is that Obsidian Fury, Fury.
Obsidian
Yeah.
Fury, you got it.
I think that Obsidian Fury got privy to the fact that they were sending a Jaeger there because Charlie Day's character is, of course, close enough that he would have gotten some information. He's the crux. He's the mastermind. He's the brainiac or whatever.
He's the Raider Repulsa.
Exactly, and I don't know how the kaiju brain in the Jaeger works, but they blew up the facility because I'm presuming that's one of like the offshore things that he had set up that was fully automated that he was using for kaijuing the drones. That's the impression that I got. I don't know if that's just me trying to give them too much credit.
By the way,
I got that feeling.
I buy that, but that wasn't
did they
adequately
mention
explained.
that it used to be like an old place for Jaeger building or something?
They did.
Yeah, and that would
They
make
built
sense.
power cores.
Yeah.
And if the power cores are full of kaiju guts, that would make sense that it was like he was subsidizing the whatever.
Or he had co-opted it to use.
Yeah,
and
exactly,
you know what?
yeah.
I would have been fine just leaving that. But the bit that bugged me is that Mako sent he specifically said megabytes, I think.
Yeah.
God, I missed that.
A few megabytes made it through, and he was able to like recode it using his magic technology.
And
And
turned it into a topographical map.
But it didn't at first because he turned it into a like kaiju symbol.
Face, yeah.
And then they had to come back, and he was like, "Okay, guys, I fucked up. It wasn't a kaiju. It's actually a map."
Yeah.
That was so fucking dumb.
Yeah, that was a little silly. Although, in all fairness to the megabytes thing, I'm pretty sure he says I can connect a couple of megabytes. I don't think he was. If my memory serves, he wasn't talking about necessarily everything they salvaged. He was just talking about connecting a few.
That's fair.
Like, he was like talking about the zipper as opposed to the jacket.
He's
if you know what I mean.
connecting a few JPEGs.
Yeah, yeah.
I put this gift together and I made a map.
But yeah, that was like I was expecting that was going to have more plot significance than it did because it didn't matter after that point.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't serve the plot at all.
They captured Obsidian Fury. We get our inkling that droid lady might be bad, but she's actually not.
Red
And-
herring.
Red herring. Yeah. Especially considering how much Obsidian Fury was in the promo material, they got nothing.
And like if they had used that scene at one point, like if the facility gets torched, they kill the thing, they punch its heart out, which honestly I was like, oh man, it's kind of like he punched its heart out or whatever, and then they ripped its face off and it had like biological things, and I was like, it punched its literal heart out. That's disgusting. But if they before they got the Obsidian Fury back to the main recruitment base, if they'd gone into like had even just a fucking throwaway scene where there were a couple of technicians and engineers that go into the facility to see what they can find, and they're like, we found some kaiju tissue, like just something small. They're just like, what the like we can't, there's no reason that this should be here, but we found it. What do you guys make of this? Like, it's torched, it's disgusting, we can't tell how old it is. because it doesn't age. That happened in the movie. They say this doesn't age. There's no half-life, so they could say like we physically can't tell because it's been destroyed, and also there's something weird about it. And they're like, that is super weird. And then they go into the drone scene. Boom, you've got like an actual plot thread there.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
It feels like a lot of this movie was cut out of this movie.
I was expecting there to be like because we do kind of see some Jaeger pilots make it into their Jaegers to fight those two drones that just happen to rip up the Shadow Dome, despite the fact that they do actually make it into their Jaegers and can fight and just don't.
They're Rangers, but they haven't had to fight in 10 years, Tony.
You know what?
There it is. I found it. They haven't had to fight in a decade.
And I did also think of this. They've never practiced Jaeger on Jaeger combat.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a thing.
But at this point, that's us trying to give credit where
That's
credit is not due, and that's not our thing. We take credit for. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Also, they say Pacific Rim at least 3 times in the movie. You're welcome.
They do.
They say the thing. We can go home.
What I was really hoping was going to come out of that was those two droids don't go to the Shadow Dome. They find out that breaches are being opened all over the world by these droids, and they have to dispatch their entire force to like every corner of the globe, and that's when they get fucked up. Because then we actually get the chance of maybe an action montage where they aren't just getting their asses handed to them.
Or an action montage where they are getting their asses handed to them, but it makes sense contextually because it's like 2 Jaegers show up and you've got 5 drone kaiju Jaegers that are opening a rift, and like one of them turns around and like sort of half cuts its friend with its chest beam and then literally rips in half the Jaeger that shows up.
Yeah.
There's bits to be done there.
What happened to what's the fast one called again?
Oh, that totally did happen
Saber
to
Athena.
Saber Athena,
Yeah, you're
Got
right.
ripped in half.
Which was
Did those pilots die?
no? At the end, all of them
They ejected?
appear. All of them appear except the
one guy who got murked.
the young boy that got deep fried.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Also, actually, Snow. That is a good point that you brought that up because I almost forgot about it. There is a scene where Guardian Bravo, which is the Jaeger that is piloted by the Russian boy who looks kind of like Nicholas Hoult,
Yep.
and the young Indian boy.
Yes.
The 2 of them are the pilots. And
Electro whip.
it's got an electric whip,
Yeah.
which is super cool. Fuck you, Iron Man 2. Whiplash sucks. This guy's good. And there's a bit where they like do like a Hot Fuzz style. Have you ever jumped through the air while firing your guns while yelling "R"? But it's like them jumping through the air sideways while doing their whip, and it like slow-mos on their faces, and they look so stupid, and it's so funny.
Well, you know what made that scene perfect? Is that it's either just before or just afterwards John Boyega says, "Fucking teenagers."
Yes.
And that's what made that scene like, yeah, man,
Perfect,
fucking
yeah.
teenagers.
It was quite good. Yeah, it's a shame that he died.
I had mixed things on this because
You should have worked with boobs instead.
I did kind of like how they went for more acrobatic fight scenes here.
Mhm.
Visually it looked more interesting. They had no weight to them.
Okay. Yes. Sorry. I had a thought when one of these particular scenes happened that stuck with me. In the movie Cloverfield.
Yep.
Probably the first tangibly good Western kaiju film. Yeah, I would say with certainty better than Godzilla 2000. Yeah, we can agree on that.
Well, yes.
You mean the 1998 one?
Yeah,
Because Godzilla 2000 is different.
yeah, Godzilla 2000 was.
What's the good one?
It was fine. But Godzilla starring Matthew Broderick. Fuck that movie. Anyways, Cloverfield comes out 2007, I believe, and there's a scene where there's a monster in a city, and it's big enough, but it's not so big. And so there's certain buildings that it is sort of cloaked behind when it's moving, right?
Yeah.
It knocks down a building in its first, 7-ish minutes of screen time. The head of the Statue of Liberty gets thrown at them, and then suddenly a building falls down, right? And when the building falls down, the city is shrouded in just shit, I'm presuming asbestos, in drywall, in concrete, in just powdered, destroyed building. and it's to the point where the film becomes almost like you can't see a thing for many minutes because this huge thing that is made out of all of these different materials has just hit the ground and it's just a shit show. And there's a scene in Pacific Rim Uprising where a Jaeger gets pushed through a building to the point where there's almost like a Jaeger-sized hole in the building.
And the building stays standing.
And and there's like glass and steel falling, and there's not a plume of smoke. Not even. There's nothing.
It's like in cartoons when they go through a building. It's just like
the
shape of them.
It's like Scott Pilgrim diving through the window.
Oh yeah.
Scott Pilgrim going through most walls.
Exactly.
Oh, speaking of buildings falling, did you guys like the gravity whip that they used? Gypsy Avenger used?
I thought that was super cool.
That was a nice little Half-Life 2 thing.
Yeah, and having a 0-point gravity producer where it's like, here's the
okay, can we just admit that the Siri in the Jaeger is basically GLaDOS?
It is. No, they got the same voice.
Yeah.
They got her voice actor.
Oh, shit.
In the first movie and the second movie, they got GLaDOS, and that actually brings me to one of the things that I wanted to anecdote.
Well, it's just because we're connected to the gravity thing.
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
This is very nitpicky, and I wouldn't have brought it up except you guys asked. And I guess I'm interrupting, so I would have brought it up. Interesting.
Yeah, go.
Interesting.
Go. Go! I believe in you.
If you have a gravity gun, your problem is solved.
Yeah, you point the gravity gun at the center of the thing, and then its entire...
Point the gravity gun at the kaiju, and it's off the ground. You're like, okay, propel yourself forward. No, you can't. Fascinating.
Or you point it at its chest, and its entire fucking physiology collapses on itself.
Well, I mean, we have two possibilities here. It's a black hole gun, or it's Syndrome's finger glove thing from The Incredibles.
But the first time that it gets used, it pulls cars and shrapnel into an orb.
Yeah,
so it's a black hole gun.
But it also lifts them off the ground. It's a healthy mix of both.
It also doesn't really make sense with the Avengers kit because it has the sword and then it has the plasma gun, and I guess it only has the plasma gun in the one hand, but I'm pretty sure it switches back and forth. Which
yeah, because in the scene with the fight with Obsidian Fury, the sword comes out of the left hand.
Yeah.
And in the scene where it's trying to redirect itself as it's cataclysmically falling from the stratosphere, the gun's on the left hand as well. So, yeah.
But
he pops in the final fight, he pops it from both hands.
He had the two from the Obsidian.
Yeah, they ripped that shit off.
But
from the building montage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know, again, because I can't help but compare the two movies. The first one, I bought the weapon loadout in Gypsy Danger. Okay, you got a gun in each hand, you got your sword in the wrist. I buy that. Cool. I don't... and I know that, this, we're talking about, fictional science here.
Anime.
And we're talking about anime here. The fact that they're, I could be completely off base with this, but the gravity gun and the plasma cannon in the same hand, that doesn't work. You are using the same parts for two very different things. That you can't have the same thing there.
I mean, I'm sure they could explain away some sort of engineering thing where there's a casing that they have, and there's two parts side by side. One part is plasma, one part is it's dumb. They could animate it away. But I agree, and first of all, if they had a 0-point gravity fucking cannon, the world's problems are solved. We built every building. We had one guy doing it. He did it. His name was Paul. He's a really nice guy. There's a skyscraper. We're done.
You could just do stuff like, I'm going to throw this kaiju at that kaiju.
And then throw them both into the sun.
But before I said something about the thing, you were gonna go into a thing.
The scene in which we're first introduced to the fact that Mako makes her reappearance in this film. Yeah, it's her, it's Gottlieb, and it's Newt. Yeah. Those are the recurring characters. She shows up in a room where a hologram is projected, and she's sitting across from Jake while he's essentially in an interrogation room. He gets arrested, right? Mm-hmm. There's a hard scene where it shows the things that are creating the holograms. They're literally GLaDOS's face.
Are they really?
That's funny.
Literally, yeah. It's a sort of a curved rectangle with smooth white and then black at the bottom and 3 dots, and the middle dot looks like an eye.
That's fun.
It's Gladys. So there you go. She's in the movie twice.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more I'm sitting here thinking about it, the more I didn't really like this movie.
That's unfortunate. The more I'm sitting here thinking about it, the more problematic it is. But also, I thought it was a fucking banger. It's a stupid as hell movie.
No, it's fine. Capital F, fine. It's all right. And honestly, it is like I said. I'm pretty sure I said this before. This is probably the best I could have hoped for from a Pacific Rim sequel that was not helmed by Del Toro.
Ballistic Del Toro.
Yeah.
Torso, sorry. I got his name wrong. Sorry.
Because there are just so many very small elements from the first film that are just absent here. That really made me love that one. Things like they went for the more anime fight scenes, but at the expense of the weight and the
Gravitas.
The gravitas, but the feel of the Jaegers. That this felt like something that two people are actually piloting, not these people are on treadmills.
When you were mentioning the Jaegers loadouts and stuff like that, and how they made sense in the first movie, and in this movie they're kind of weird.
Yeah.
Cherno Alpha, his loadout is literally that he has punches.
He punches hard.
He's got so hard.
He's got punch, and then when the punch extends, he's got a long punch.
Yeah.
And that's Cherno, baby.
Don't underestimate that he has punches.
Never underestimate.
Even that still worked because he's the last of the Gen 1s.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It makes perfect sense.
They bodged them together.
He's got the punchy. He's giving the Russians cancer while they pilot him.
Speaking of generations, I'm pretty sure it was someone from Gen X who's let's put the Trollolo meme in there.
Oh,
they
Christ.
memes.
Oh, right.
Just
that was
meme
interesting.
it, baby.
And then I swear John Boyega did the Salt Bay meme with the sprinkles.
Oh, see, I didn't catch that one.
Did he? Oh.
But and honestly, the fact that the Trollololo song is in there is a fucking travesty.
Yeah.
But I liked that they didn't frame it like there was a moment for you to laugh. It wasn't like a joke in a Paul Blart movie where they say, "Here, I'm gonna eat a taco," and then
gonna fart,
and then there's a moment of silence where it's like, "Ah ha ha, he fat, so he eat taco." It wasn't framed that way. It was just the song starts playing, and the one guy's like, "What the fuck?" and the other guy's like, "I love it. It reminds me of my childhood, calms me." And the other guy's like, "Does not calm me. Does not calm me." And then they sort of fade out.
Yeah.
So it wasn't framed as bad as some memes, but it was a fucking meme, and that's a big problem. All right, is there any... I mean, we sort of talked around the fact that Newt's a super good villain, and it's because he's been brain-fucking a kaiju for generations. That's a good... They did a good job with that.
That's the best part of the movie.
Good part of the movie. He becomes the villain, he gets punched in the face by Scott Eastwood. Also very good.
Yeah.
Scott Eastwood gets to punch Charlie Day. Boom. Love it.
Are we going to talk about the end credit scene? Or not really the end credit scene, but...
The non-existent end credit scene that we waited for.
Well, there's a bit at the end where...
Yeah, I was talking about the bit at the end.
The bit after they do the title.
John Boyega got Charlie, and Newt, and Newt's all freaking out, and he's like, "Hachi machi, I'm gonna ha 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 wee!" And then John Boyega comes in, and he's like, "Let the things in your brain know that we're not gonna wait for them to come next time. We're coming to them." Fade to black.
So this kind of because you've said a couple of times this movie should have been longer. This movie feels like half the movie isn't there.
Mm-hmm. It feels like bits are missing. For sure.
Okay, so the first Pacific Rim had that moment as well, where you go from action scene to the title and the music swells, and then you go to something else.
Yeah.
And in the first Pacific Rim, it happens in the first 10 minutes. That is the scene where Raleigh loses his brother, and then he watches out of the program.
Without an arm, piloting a Jaeger on his own.
That is how we are introduced to Pacific Rim. The kaiju are here, we build robots to fight back, we start fighting back. Mm-hmm. The comparable moment in Pacific Rim Uprising is at the very end, because this movie was just a teaser for another movie.
Definitely we can guarantee at this point, this movie is getting fair enough reviews, and it's already made money tonight.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be a third movie.
Oh yeah.
At this point.
I just hope it doesn't fall into the whole really shitty third movie trope.
Fingers fucking crossed. Fingers fucking crossed that it's not The Godfather 3 of the Pacific Rim series.
Maybe it'll be the Transformers 3.
Maybe it'll be the Thor Ragnarok.
Ah, I like him. But
Thor Ragnarok is contingent on the first two sucking.
the one thing
That's accurate.
the one thing that I wanted to bring up before I'm sure we're getting close to the point where we're going to do our closing credits, our wrap or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we talked enough about... We talked about the cadets, and we talked about the problems with the split plot and stuff. But Amari.
She's alright.
The kid. She was good. I think she served a very integral purpose to the plot, and normally I'm annoyed by that kid character. And in the first scene, I was annoyed by that fucking kid character. And then, as she got to progress, I was like, no, she's doing it. This is fine. And I ceased to be annoyed by her.
It was a, good, I don't want to say callback, but it was a good follow-up to the relationship that Raleigh and Mako had in the first movie, because it was familiar, but it was different. They were trying to do a different thing. This was more firmly mentor-mentee.
Yeah, and one of the big beefs that I have with that is that their relationship essentially has the exact same narrative beats, because it's like, meet, not get along, start to get along okay, drift, chase the rabbit, random access brain trigger.
Yeah.
Literally happens in that sequence, and then eventually drift together, save the day. It's beat for beat.
Beat for beat, it's pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same thing.
But the details are different, and the characters are different.
Yeah.
And even when they didn't like each other, they had a respect for each other.
Sort of a goofy chemistry.
Mako and Raleigh had a respect for each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Jake and Amara did not.
No, but I thought that as much as she annoyed me during the first scrapper scene,
them together, I enjoyed.
Yeah, exactly. The two of them have a good high five. This is fun.
Yeah,
and that first scene, that very first scene where she's introduced, I'm like, oh, she's gonna be the anime, the young girl in the anime who's friends with the main character or whatever. She's gonna be that goofy kid character, and she's gonna have plucky comments to make or whatever. And that is the case, but in the first scene, it sucks!
And speaking of the whole, having fun, they literally have a fucking snowball fight at the end.
Which I thought was kind of a cute note. I was okay with it.
I was fine with that, yeah. Because, they didn't go for the same... This was a different movie than the first one. They didn't go for emotional intensity. That was the perfect note for this to go out on.
Fun.
Because it's goofy.
Yeah. Totally.
Believe it or not, I couldn't agree more.
I do believe it, because I know you, babe. Alright, boys. I'm thinking right now might be the time
to wrap it up.
This is last call. Any closing thoughts before I impose a thing upon you?
Just because... I don't want to sour anybody on this movie. I actually think, all things considered, this movie and the original both should not be as good as they are. Just like you write this pitch down on a piece of paper, you hand me this movie, and I say no.
we're not making that. And of course, Ballistic Gel Torso, recent Academy Award winner, at the time said, "No, we're gonna make it though because I have the money, and I like anime."
Yeah, so it shouldn't have been made, but it was, and it totally works. Any of the gripes I have with this movie, I didn't have as strongly while watching it. Yeah. There were a lot of stuff that I kind of ruminated over afterwards and was like, no. With the exception of Mount Fuji, I laughed in the theater.
I did too.
Yeah, there was an audible cackle from our row when Mount Fuji... They're headed to Mount Fuji! And there was this resounding...
Yeah.
I think that might be the big difference in how we're approaching it, because you write down the concept for Pacific Rim, the first movie, no matter how many plot details or not you include, and show it to me, I'm in. Because I grew up with giant robots, I grew up with Power Rangers, I grew up with Escaflowne and Gundam and all that shit. Actually didn't grow up with
Zoids.
They grew up with Zoids.
Yeah, you remember Zoids.
This is the kind of shit that I was totally down for, and
giant robots to you was giant monsters to me.
We're
two sides of that same coin.
I feel Pacific Rim was when I saw it was the best possible version of that movie that it could have been. When I was expecting what Pacific Rim Uprising ended up being, a goofy, fun time of robots fighting monsters.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if Pacific Rim Uprising had been the first movie in this series, we would not be getting a second.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's fair.
Agreed.
Any hard closing thoughts?
Just to finish up, the only thing I think that doesn't work is when you say it's live action. As far as the pitch for this movie goes, is if you're pitching to me a live action film, I would have said no. Except now Pacific Rim exists and we can say yes.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Sorry, one other thing that just cropped up.
Go in.
The first movie in a market full of giant robot action scenes, mostly thanks to Michael Bay, it made itself visually distinct from them. This movie attempted to make itself visually distinct from the first Pacific Rim, and ended up being visually similar to pretty much everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I feel, is not great.
I will agree up until the point where we're talking about the, however brief, the 3 kaiju at the end. Before they become the super kaiju.
I wanted them to be more colorful, but their silhouettes I really liked.
Yeah, and I just like the fact that the one had the
face
maw
shield
that opens up.
That was rad.
That was cool. And then you got the one that kind of looks like a spiky salamander.
But that's why I wanted that fight to be longer.
I wanted more of them before they fused into the Super Beast.
Yeah.
And sorry, when we were watching the movie and they fused together, I was like, oh, it's Rob Zombie's Super Beast.
Yeah.
It's the Super Beast that Rob Zombie told me about. And I think that needs to be harped on more because there it is.
No, I just heard Rita Repulsa throwing her staff down to earth and yelling, "Make my monster grow!" Because that's what Newt did.
Or with
his nano machines.
The JoJo reference of, I will lengthen the shaft!
Yeah, that happens.
All right. Right now.
Yeah.
I'm imposing the arbitrary rating system that we make up on our own, and I'm starting with Lucas. Give me an arbitrary rating system, and then, feel free to explain it to whatever extent you need.
I'll give it 1 crate of sriracha sauce out of 1 tub of ice cream and excessive amounts of sprinkles and condiments.
I like it. Toppings.
There's the word. I'm tired.
Don't judge my toppings.
I'm tired. I have to work in the morning.
All right, Matthew.
I give it a scrap out of a Gypsy Danger.
That's pretty good.
Do what I can.
I was actually gonna use that.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you go. I'll think of something.
Oh man, I was trying to think of a good one. I'm gonna give it a category 13 kaiju out of a required category approximately 9 kaiju.
I'm gonna give it an analog out of 10.
Nice.
Ooh.